Good evening. I'm Corvallis Advocate Assistant Editor Emily Ratcliffe, and co-moderating with me tonight is publisher Steve Schultz. Welcome to tonight's Cityspeak Forum. Cityspeak Forums are co-presented by the Corvallis Advocate and the City Club of Corvallis. The Advocate offers fresh news daily online, these town hall meetings, and will be emerging from the pandemic with some exciting changes over the next several months. Our co-presenter, the City Club of Corvallis, is a volunteer-run nonprofit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. Next week, Cityspeak will examine the childcare desert in Corvallis, and next month, we'll examine the local restaurant industry as it emerges from the pandemic. We will also be hosting a primary debate for the local election. Tonight, we host State of the City. Our program includes Corvallis Mayor Biff Traber, our 3 county commissioners, School Superintendent Ryan Noss, along with our police chief, sheriff, and officials from economic development, housing, and sustainability. We asked the Benton County Health Department to also field questions from the public, as they have in the past, but new Director Suzanne Hoffman declined for herself and her department. If you, as a viewer, have questions, we welcome you to comment on our Facebook posting of the Livestream event or to email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Again, that's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Steve?
Thank you, Emily. Folks, the folks over at Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Food Co-op make these town halls possible, but we couldn't do it without viewers like yourself as well. If you're not a subscriber yet, levels are $5 or $10 monthly. You can go to our site, very easy to subscribe. Please consider doing that. At this point, community-run journalism is rare in this country. So it's an opportunity to support that in your own community. The folks that support it are even rarer. So I really want to take a moment and just give a heartfelt thanks to our current subscribers and our current donors. You guys are great. If you are not a subscriber or a donor yet, please do consider becoming one and join the folks that are. Emily.
Thanks, Steve. So first we'll go to questions from the editorial board, and then we'll move on to questions from our viewers. We'll start with agency officials, and we'll end the evening with our county commissioners and then Mayor Traber. So first, for Corvallis Police Chief Nick Hurley. In the last year, what difficulties has your department faced and what's been accomplished? Also, looking forward to the next year, what are the challenges and opportunities for the community?
All right. So thank you first, Steve and Emily, for hosting and inviting me. This is a big honor to sit amongst all these leaders within our community. But for me, I'd really like to touch on the fact that while we are a very safe community, we're not immune to some of the criminal acts and violence that we're seeing nationally, and we see on the news just to our neighbors to the north and south of us. We have seen some uptick in the last 2 years of assaults, DUIs, vandalism, trespass, burglaries. So we're continuing to work with our crime analysts to determine locations and trends, and then we work with all of our partners within the community to figure out how can we best address these issues to try to reduce the impact of the crime on our community. One of the other challenges that we're facing right now, and I know I'm not alone in this, but law enforcement feels very particularly hit with is staffing. Trying to recruit and retain good quality men and women who want to serve the Corvallis community as a law enforcement officer is becoming significantly more challenging. The hiring puddle is getting very, very shallow and quite murky, and we're competing with all the other local agencies, and I'm sure the sheriff, he and I have many conversations about that. But what it leads to is burnout and exhaustion from our staff, and less interaction and opportunity for our staff to go out and really be with the community. And one of the other challenges that I'll just touch on is the Measure 110 decision that the voters enacted over a year ago. And that's the decriminalization of personal amounts of narcotics. And the challenge that we're facing with that is that there's right now, the way it is set up, there's really no teeth in the system to try to help folks get into the treatment programs that have been set up by Measure 110. So I'm hoping that maybe the legislative committees can really kind of come together to figure out, is there a way to close that loophole versus the current system? We're also seeing a significant uptick in mental health and crisis-related calls for service. So over the last 4 years, we've seen a 59% increase in any type of call that relates to mental health crisis response. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to this past 6 months, I've been working with Commissioner Ojero on a subcommittee where we created the community outreach, crisis outreach response and engage team, the core team. And it's a collaborative and a cooperative effort that mental health folks, qualified mental health practitioner, actually a licensed QMHP and a very specialized trained officer. They're focused solely on responding with a trauma-informed, compassionate care in mind to help the individual that's experiencing the crisis. And this is really a best practice model in law enforcement and public crisis response to maintain safety for the responders, the individual in crisis, and our community members. So that's really sort of the big challenges and things that I'm looking forward to, is to see really how this pilot project can maybe expand out into the county and the city and community of Philomath. We work a little bit as well with the Oregon State University folks, although they've got their own program. We're really trying to get in front of and address that national issue of mental health and crisis response. That 59% increase over 4 years is really a scary number to see if that 59% trend line continues.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Now on to Benton County Sheriff Jef Van Arsdall. What difficulties has your department faced over the past year, and what has your department accomplished? And also, what are the challenges and opportunities that you foresee for the next year for the community?
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for having me join you this evening. It's a real honor and privilege. As far as achievements, the minute I was sworn in, went right to work on the local option levy. We went to work and had that local option. We were able to go door to door, and it passed with over 70% approval. We worked towards getting reaccredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. It was particularly sweet this year because I did not have an accreditation staff member, and so we assigned it to a sergeant, Leslie Thilberg, and the executive director from Oregon Accreditation Alliance actually said in an email he sent to me, there were no files lacking proofs of compliance, and therefore no files were returned for additional information in the final report. He'd only seen that one other time in his 6 years in his role as executive director. So I was really proud of Sergeant Thilberg. She hit a home run there. Got the Monroe Service District contract back. As you may or may not know, prior to my arrival, Junction City Police Department was contracted to provide law enforcement services to the community of Monroe. Through relationship building, I was able to get their confidence back, and now we have that contract back. In addition, we also opened up the substation in Monroe, so we have a presence in South County in an office that's manned by personnel from your sheriff's office. Similarly, we're working with the Dare Village Council and city management up there. We have the equipment purchase. We've been trying to identify a location to put a substation in North County as well. I've been working with Chief Hurley, along with Chief Marcia Harnden from Albany Police Department, Chief Rubin from Philomath Police Department, Chief Anderson from OSU Police Department, and the currently appointed Sheriff in Lynn County, Michelle Duncan, just on relationship building, resources sharing, anything that comes up. We make sure we take care of each other and take care of our communities. I participated wholly in part in the Justice System Improvement Program with Commissioner Ojero, and it's been quite an eye-opener for me, and it's an exciting opportunity for the government, or I'm sorry, for the community to have input in what their government's doing for them and how we proceed. And I encourage everybody to continue to participate from a community standpoint as we move forward. In the jail side of the house, we've launched a pretrial release program where we have a sergeant who makes notifications to try and reduce our fail to appear rates. And this last month, our fail to appear rate, which was 19%, which seems high, but that is a significant reduction in the fail to appears that we've had in the county. Similarly, I worked with our county EDI director to create a reentry form, and now we ask questions of folks that are released back into our community so we can better get them in touch with resources or anything they may need as they reenter into the Benton County community. This last year, we had the opportunity to do a charity softball event at Goss Stadium hosted by the Corvallis Knights. We played Lynn County Sheriff's Office. It benefited the ABC House. I participated in a pie eating competition with Chief Hurley, which Chief Hurley won. I'll give him credit there, but it benefited several veterans programs within Benton County. And then Lynn County Sheriff's Office hosted a dodgeball charity event to benefit Ophelia's Place. So we've been doing more than just law enforcement. Problems that we face, of course, Chief Hurley hit on it. Anything pandemic, staffing. Staffing's been our problem when you know, whether it's in the jail and patrol, parole and probation, and then just the shallow pool of candidates. We struggle just like any place else to find good qualified folks. And I refuse to just put a seat in the seat just to fill that position. And so as a result, we're struggling a little bit to find good qualified folks similar to the police department. Future challenges, like I said, it's going to be the staffing issue is going to be up front. We're just really struggling and to find qualified folks. And then the opportunities, I'm looking to start a community review board within the sheriff's office to increase transparency and accountability with your sheriff's office. Now that we're getting close to the other side of the pandemic, I'll be able to have a Citizens of Police Academy where we can expose folks to what we do, and then from there move into the next phases of the community review board. I'm currently functioning without an undersheriff, and so I need to start looking into finding an undersheriff to fill that role as well. And then just community engagement opportunities. I encourage everybody to participate in the JSIP program as we move forward into the next step. We will be doing the chili cook-off again in the community, hosted by Benton County Sheriff's Office and Paloma Police Department. It'll be September 11th at the Paloma Frolic Grounds. And then we'll, of course, have the second annual charity softball game with the Lynn County Sheriff's Office. I'm open, I'm available. I'm on the second floor of the LEC. If you ever have any questions, call me, stop in, email me. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And now to Corvallis School District Superintendent Ryan Noss. Ryan, what challenges has the Corvallis School District faced over the past year? And what has the school district accomplished? And then also looking forward to the next year, what are some challenges and opportunities that you see for the school department or the school district, excuse me?
No problem. Thanks. And again, it's great to be on the screen with all of you, a group of folks that I've worked with a long time and value and respect. And will be nice when we're all in person doing these things in the future. So again, thanks for including me with this panel. So I think the obvious one that I would start with would be COVID and having our students spend so much time away from school. I know that our families have sacrificed a lot over the last 2 years in supporting their kids and the youth of Corvallis in a way that people didn't anticipate, parents as well as our educators. So one of the things I'm really proud of is the work of our educators and the work of our community to support our kids. As you know, I think that Chief Hurley talked about being able to bring staff on. One of the things that we're focused on is retaining the staff that we do have, because we have some incredible educators and incredible support staff. And so one of the things that I see as a challenge, but also an opportunity, is continuing to identify ways of recognizing our staff by community, the accolades that should come and continue to come for those educators who made it happen, along with the parents, is just something really spectacular. If we think about where we've been and where we're headed, it's again pretty amazing. So next week we'll come back to school in a new place where masking will be optional. And so one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about right now is how do we make sure that there's grace and space and understanding for individual decisions for our staff, for our students, and how do we make sure that we can come back together in a place where everyone feels safe and cared about and can really focus on education. Some of the highlights have been opening 2 new schools and Garfield, which I think is almost a new school in itself. So it's been incredible to be able to open those spaces. Last night we had tours at Bessie Coleman, and the highlight was students being in the space with their parents saying, hey, I want to show you my classroom. And so we had tours that were planned and impromptu visits to classrooms that kids wanted to have to show their parents where their desks are. So again, in the past, that wouldn't, the new spaces would be monumental, but the ability for a 7-year-old to go with a parent and say, hey, this is where my desk is and it's next to my friend, again, is something special that we forget about because of where we've been over the last couple of years. Also, one of the things that we've done is we've really focused on mental health. And so we have increased the mental health supports in our schools. So we have mental health therapists and skills trainers in our schools K-12, which was something that we didn't have in the past. We had a pilot started, but we've been able to expand it, and the timing couldn't be better as we have kids return to school and returning to interacting with one another. And those things take practice. And in some situations, we were out of practice. So that's been an opportunity and a success. One other success I'd like to highlight is our graduation rate. So for our Latinx students, the graduation rate for last year was 92%, which is an all-time high. And I attribute so much of that to having our strong dual language program K-12, and again, creating additional opportunities for our kids as a result of that. So again, I think there's a lot to be proud of, and we're still in the middle of coming out of these experiences that we've had. So there's more work to do. But all in all, I feel really optimistic about where we're headed and where we're going as a school district.
Thank you, Ryan. Now on to Community Development Director Paul Bilotta. Same question. In the past year, what opportunities and challenges, or what accomplishments and challenges has the city faced? And looking forward to the next year, what are the challenges and opportunities do you see for the community?
Sure, thank you very much. And again, also like everybody else, really happy to be here. In the last year, of course, the pandemic is driving everything. And in land use, which is where I work, everything there's always a trade-off. So if you want to solve one thing, it's going to cause something else to go a different direction. If you're trying to get more housing, you're now building housing in places where people maybe didn't want you to build housing. So there's always that trade-off, and there's been lots of things going on right now. The city has really been really turned the corner on housing, on how policies were going to go forward in 15-16. And that really gave us a nice head start to get into where now some of these issues that are really hot on the statewide, we've already taken care of some of those aspects. On the housing front, because of the efforts that we did start, about 5-6 years ago, we're seeing housing production better than we've seen in decades. Unfortunately, we're dealing with about a 30-year backlog, so it's going to take a while. It's very hard for the community to recognize that we can only get so many done in a year. But we did, to give you an example of how things have turned up, just in January, which is usually our slowest month of the year, we normally do about 50 single-family homes every year. In January alone, we had 26. So things are moving fast out here. You also know that over the last couple of years, we've put up some pretty big apartment projects. It's also been a very, very active year for the state legislature and mandating pretty heavy changes to the code, which the community is having to deal with. The middle housing is one of them that has a lot of people engaged on that, and it's difficult for Corvallis because we're used to being heavily involved in the process, and the state has pretty much said this is what you're going to do and this is how you're going to do it, and that's a tough message to deliver in this community. We have done some work. On the other hand, another place where we've got done some interesting work is our mixed use zones to get more housing over our commercial properties. And that has been an example of both a challenge and an opportunity that's occurred. We were in that process before the pandemic hit, and then and it is an engaged process. How do we engage in the future with the pandemic? And so we had to try a lot of different things with video. We did surveys and videos out there. We reached a whole lot more people. Instead of the 5 or 10 that would normally show up at an in-person meeting, we were dealing with hundreds and hundreds of people that we were reaching and getting really detailed comments. And I think the benefit of that sort of new way of engagement showed up last night. The mixed use zone was approved by the council unanimously. And and if you know Corvallis and land use, nothing tends to occur here without several people being very upset about it. And in that process, because there had been so much engagement on the front end, almost probably 80–90% of the people were in support, and the ones who had any sort of question, it was about a small tweak. So I think we're onto something here. It's a different way of engaging. And then I can't talk without, also on the affordable housing side, we're seeing more affordable housing coming out than we've ever seen in the city's history. So we have 100 units going in right now off of 53rd. We have 11 units that we are starting up here in South Corvallis for owner occupied. We're currently negotiating 2 confidential projects that will bring another 200 units of affordable housing. This is in a town that usually has a good year being like 5 every once in a while, and so again, they're not coming online in the next month. They're under construction. It takes a while, but that's going forward. And last, I have to talk on houselessness. Through the HOPE recommendations, the city and the county have come together and are working very, very closely. Now we've got CSC working closely with us as well to start moving on really changing our system and redesigning our system, which was not serving our houseless population very well. We were serving some parts of the population very well, and some parts who had more needs we weren't serving at all. And so it's been kind of an opportunistic moment because we hadn't planned it this way, but there's a lot of federal and state money that have come down the pipe for houselessness issues. And because we have this 2 years of policy work already in place, we're in a good position to take these ideas and actually fund them and go forward. Biggest challenge is staffing. It's not only our staffing, but right now we're having to hold money back because our providers don't have enough staffing to implement the money we've given them. So, a lot of people with the pandemic who volunteer pulled back because of health concerns. A lot of people are not entering into this field. So if you've ever thought about getting involved in houselessness, people who are watching, now is the time. Please come down and talk to any of our folks. Our own staffing, I have 2 out of my 3 divisions have 50% vacancy right now. So at the same time, we're getting all this increased workload, we have a third to a half of the people to do the work. So that's our world right now.
Thank you, Paul. And now on to City Economic Development Manager, Kate Porsche. So same question to you, Kate. What challenges and accomplishments do you see the city as having experienced over the last year? And looking forward to the next year, what are those challenges and opportunities that you see for the community?
Thanks so much, Emily, and thanks Advocate and City Club for hosting this. I love these forums. I think it's so interesting to hear everybody's answers. I think the 2-word takeaways, we'll wait to see what the electeds say, but are workforce and optimism, I think are going to be 2 themes that we're going to be hearing tonight. So let me start first with some accomplishments. Our team, like a number of other teams in the city and our partners at the county, very quickly pivoted during the pandemic, of course, to get engaged through the EOC and other places in terms of helping businesses with funding and resources. We got to be a part of standing up some cool programs like the Business Right of Way that's allowed our restaurants to expand their seating out into parking spaces to create additional seating. Some challenges that I wanted to hit on, and you guys have heard it before, workforce, and you're hearing that from all the different folks on the panel, but this is affecting our businesses in our community as well in terms of our traded sector businesses, the great resignation that Paul hit on, and early retirements. But we also think childcare is a part of the workforce issue as well, and that's a space that our team, along with some regional partners through our Council of Governance and the Governor's Regional Solutions team, are actively looking to find some solutions to. Some other sort of 2-sided challenge and / opportunity, the availability of industrial land in our community we think is really important. Our team is continuing to look at potential to make some space that would be easier for folks to develop. So we're working on an annexation of the airport and airport industrial park to make it easier for folks to build and grow down there and be in our community. And of course, helping businesses following the pandemic, helping them come out of this strong. We've seen a number of sectors and different groups that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Sectors, when we talk about that, of course, it's the ones you might think of: our restaurants, our tourism, minority and women-owned businesses, but also some of our manufacturers with some of the constraints we've seen with supply chain issues that have come about. So really trying to keep our finger on the pulse of that and find new and creative ways to help folks. So I think a couple of points of bright spots when we talk about opportunities for this next year is our new urban renewal district in South Corvallis. I'm going to one-up the sheriff and just say that was passed by an 85% approval rating, which we were pretty darn proud of. And thank you, voters of Corvallis. It is just getting going, and we're really excited to be considering some projects down in that area that we think are going to bring vitality and really see the goals of that part of our community come to fruition. The other one, this is a fun little one, but folks in our department, in partnership with Pacific Power, were able to stand up an e-bike rebate program for low-income folks in our community. It's been super popular, helping folks with transportation, meeting our sustainability goals and things like that. And last, a little teaser for folks watching tonight. I want folks to stay tuned throughout the summer regarding a new community-driven model that we're going to be using to gather ideas for our Imagine Corvallis 2040 vision and how we translate those into projects. So more to come on that. But again, I think I'll end with that notion of optimism. Emily, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Now on to Sustainability Coordinator Scott Didbod. Same question. What difficulties and what accomplishments has your department faced, and what opportunities and challenges do you see for the next year?
Well, first of all, thanks for including me in this panel. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our sustainability efforts, and I think it's a really important aspect to this conversation. First of all, I just want to say that the Strategic Operational Plan, the SOP, and the Climate Action Plan serve as our guiding documents generally for many of our sustainability efforts. Related to that, in 2021, we reformatted our annual sustainability report, and that coincides better with our fiscal year and with our budgets in a way that allows us to align those things better with sustainability projects. The new format of the annual report offers the opportunity to celebrate our story through new projects and some of our recurring efforts that we do throughout the city that we don't often talk about. Here's I don't know if we're going to be able to see that very well, but that's what the sustainability annual report looks like now. And I encourage you all to take a look at it. It's 21 pages long, more of a story format instead of just numbers that really try to tell that story around sustainability. So we're committed to conducting an organizational greenhouse gas inventory every other year. Our 2020 results showed a 14% decline from in our overall greenhouse gas emissions since 2018. So in 2 years, we went down quite a bit. Some highlights of that include a 51% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from natural gas and electricity. So that's, we're well on target. We're well on track for our 2050 target of a 75% reduction below 1990 emissions. We did a full switch from regular to renewable diesel. This includes all our transit buses and heavy equipment. That has beneficial climate impacts, and it also has a reduction in particulate matter emissions, which is a really important local air quality issue. We signed agreements to purchase an additional 9% of our electricity through Oregon solar projects. And those projects should begin generating electricity later this year. And then we did a renovation. We completed the renovation on the Corvallis Community Center, or C3, which was formerly the senior center. And the design elements were focused on LEED standards, which LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Some of those features that we included were like an environmental control system that monitors, controls, and reports energy use, and bioswales and all the parking lots that slow and filter the parking lot runoff. New delivery service by the library in response to the COVID pandemic. That was the last couple of years, but that really helped maintain most existing services while improving accessibility to groups that may not have had access to those services previously. We did several efforts to promote alternative transportation in the community. This includes things like the buffered bike lanes on Circle Boulevard, the Eric E. Austin Memorial Bypass. It's a shared use path in Southtown, and the green pavement markings that you see at certain intersections that delineate shared bicycle and shared bicycle use on roadways. And then 112 ADA ramps were reconstructed for improved access to sidewalks. So thinking ahead to next year and beyond, we're continuing to move forward on reducing our greenhouse gas footprint from electrical use. We have some really exciting opportunities both on and off site regarding solar. And we expect by early 2024 to be purchasing at least 80% of our at least 80% of our electrical purchases will be from renewable solar that's produced here in Oregon. We are also beginning to convert our bus fleet to electric. We've already ordered 2 buses. We're working on the infrastructure for charging that. We plan to continue moving that along. And so we have a 13 bus fleet. So 2 is a fast start, and getting the infrastructure into place is really the big hurdle. And then when you think about challenges, a lot of them relate to supply chain. Like we've made a promise that we're going to replace our passenger vehicles with electric models when they come due for replacement. But so the supply chain's really delaying the shipments on those. And like, for example, right now, we've been waiting 2 years for 2 Nissan Leafs for our downtown fleet. Charging infrastructure has been in place for a while. And so some of those supply chain issues are really affecting us. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Scott. Now on to Board of Benton County Commissioner Chair Nancy Weiss. Same questions for you, Nancy. What challenges and accomplishments has the city or has the county experienced in the past year? And what opportunities and challenges do you see for the next?
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to attend this event. Thank you to the Corvallis Advocate and the City Club of Corvallis for hosting the event, and to Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op for sponsoring. I am Nancy Weiss, Benton County Commissioner. I joined the board in January of 2021, and as of this year, I am the board chair. Many of you might also remember me as the previous Ward 6 Corvallis City Councilor and Vice President. Looking back, this has been quite a year. And I know you are also going to hear from my other fellow 2 commissioners about a lot of big items. I will quickly acknowledge COVID. It has affected every aspect of our lives. It has impacted county functions in unprecedented ways, and it's been beating up our staff. Moving forward, we need to mitigate impacts to our staff and find meaningful ways to provide some respite for them. When I think about what we've done the past year and what we want to do in the next year or 2, I immediately think back to the goals I set when I ran for commissioner. 4 core goals. 1, prudent steps forward on the justice system improvement program. And I believe you will hear more on that from Commissioner Ojero. Number 2, improve public records access and transparency. So I'm happy to report that the county is currently undertaking a website redesign project. So when that is all said and done, community members will be able to actually find documents, packets, meeting links much more easily. So I'll be looking for that in the next year or 2. My third goal had to do with land use, preserving resource zones, development, etc. With that goal in mind, I got myself appointed to the Local Officials Advisory Committee, which advises the Land Conservation and Development Commission and the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. That gives Benton County a seat at the table and allows me to advocate for good land use practices during the next 2 years of that term. And I do have to thank our new Community Development Director, Darren Nichols, for encouraging me to apply for that committee. Lastly, number 4, foster pandemic economic impact recovery. And I'm very excited to report that the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that the county has been allocated, we have decided to use a portion of those dollars. We've earmarked them under a notice of funding opportunity. So that's going to be $2.4 million per year for 3 years. The notice of funding opportunity opened up February 18th, and it enables nonprofit, governmental, and community-based organizations to apply for funding. The eligible uses for the funds include things like supporting the recovery of small businesses, nonprofits, or specifically impacted industries, facilitating access to health and social services, addressing housing insecurity, and providing assistance to households that have endured negative economic impacts from the pandemic. And one other topic I'll mention briefly is that I am now the commissioner on the HOPE Executive Board. And moving forward, we are forming a work group to focus on researching best practices that align with the prioritized HOPE recommendations. We've also just appointed 4 new members, which includes representation from rural Benton County, Philomath, our Black community, our LGBTQI+ community, and individuals who have lived experience with homelessness. To wrap up, basically, I've been working hard for Benton County and all of you this past year, and so have my fellow commissioners and the sheriff and all of our staff. And moving forward, I'm going to continue working hard, and I know my colleagues will as well. Together, we're going to get some great things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And now on to one of our county commissioners, Pat Malone. What difficulties and accomplishments do you feel Benton County has experienced in the past year? And what opportunities and challenges do you see for the next year for the community?
Excellent question, Emily. I really appreciate the panel tonight and put a plug in for subscribing to the Advocate. I'm concerned about becoming a local news desert, and the Advocate is part of our community communications, and just like the event tonight is a good example of things that wouldn't get done if the Advocate wasn't around. I'm Pat Malone, Commissioner and Vice Chair this year. I'll go try to hit a few things that haven't been covered yet. The county's been personnel challenges have been mentioned several times, and we've made some great progress in filling some key spots. I think our new Community Development Director, Darren Nichols' name was already mentioned, but he's, I think, 6 months into the job and off and running, and I think was an excellent hire, and looking forward to great things from him. Our longtime financial person, Mary Otley, retired she retired more times than Cher did, and we just couldn't. We had difficulty filling the position, but finally did, and have Rick Krager. I think started last fall, and is again just a outstanding hire. He has over 20 years experience testifying and lobbying before the state legislature, and is already pointed us in the direction of, well, there might be funds over there, and places that we really hadn't looked at before. And so Rick is an important new member of our team. Community health centers, Carla Jones was moved up to the director position, and so that's another key position. And okay. And I want to mention one other is the who was the sheriff. Yeah, we appointed him a little over a year ago, and like the others, really feel fortunate that he was available, and he's off and running, and I really appreciate his engagement with the community. Want to talk a little bit about our building, the Calapooya building, phase 1. The Board of Commissioners assessment and records and elections have already moved in, and and it's I think we're in the process of getting LEED certified silver, and appreciate the effort that it took to get that. But the idea with the Calapooya building is we will have many of our public facing departments there, so we can do a kind of a one-stop shop approach. And then the Sunset building is quarter mile away, and in between is the Oregon DHS building. So we're getting a real core of services out on Research Way. Talk a little bit about what the county's been doing on the climate crisis that we take very seriously, and trying to lead by example. Just a couple of weeks ago, we got our first hybrid pickup for Public Works, and as was mentioned by the city, as we replace vehicles, looking to see if we can get a much more climate-friendly ways of getting around. But I think that's could talk a little bit about infrastructure, but I'll save that for another time because I want to leave time for questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Now on to our other Benton County Commissioner, Zan Ojiro. Same question. What difficulties and accomplishments do you feel the county has experienced in the past year, and what challenges and opportunities do you see for the community for the next year?
Thank you, Emily and Steve. Thanks to the City Club and to the Advocate for putting on this panel tonight, and your sponsors as well. My portfolio this last year included housing, health, and the justice system. I served on the Home Opportunity Planning and Equity, or HOPE Advisory Board, for its first couple of years. You've heard a little bit about that already, but I wanted to extend a huge thank you to all of the community partners and volunteers that comprise that board, who came up with a set of 12 consensus recommendations to the Corvallis Council and Board of Commissioners about addressing critical gaps in our continuum of homelessness services. The elected bodies accepted those recommendations and directed staff to prioritize shelter 24/7, 365. But getting there, of course, requires addressing several other HOPE recommendations and bolstering staff capacity. And you heard from Paul Bilotta that we are working on that diligently. We are using some of our American Rescue Plan Act funds and funds from a new legislatively funded state pilot program to help us build that staff capacity so that we can add shelter and much needed low income and affordable housing over the next couple of years. I don't think it's an accident that we have this opportunity of in terms of funding right now. As we started putting these plans together on the Hope Advisory Board, we knew that this was coming, and we wanted to make sure that we had the capacity and some of those project plans that were ready. I have to mention the Project Turnkey project that's being run by Unity Shelter and owned by Corvallis Housing First, the former Budget Inn on 99. It added the capacity immediately and allowed more than 20 people to be in shelter rather than living on the streets during COVID. I continue to serve on the leadership team for the Justice System Improvement Program, and we've made a lot of progress there as well. We selected the North site for our Justice Campus after a broad community engagement. I'm sure there are questions about that, and we'll get to them later. I've supported the Sheriff's Office and courts in their steps towards a full-fledged pretrial services program to reduce our failure to appear rate and keep folks from gumming up our system. Also helped support the launch of the joint mental health co-response model that you heard about from Chief Hurley Core. That two-person workweek team has responded to 27% of the mental health calls that have been fielded by dispatch and reduced by half the number of peace officer holds or custody for individuals in crisis, keeping people out of both the emergency room and the jail. The goal for this next year is to expand to swing shift when more of the mental health calls tend to come in. The data that we're collecting this year will inform that expansion, but please help us support funds for that expansion as we move forward so we can address the needs of people in crisis. And on topic of crisis, we've now raised all the funds that we need for a new mental health crisis center, which is in conceptual design. This respite service is a really high priority. We hope to have the doors open within 18 months because it'll be a place for people to go when they're in crisis. The core team can take people there. The family members can take people there, or folks can self-refer, and someone will be able to stay for as little as a few hours or up to 30 days in order to stabilize when they're in crisis. We owe a special thanks to Representative Rayfield for his support for this crisis center. And we expect to get funds from congressionally designated fund, a request put in by Congressman DeFazio as well, eventually. And then there's COVID, of course. You've heard about it from everyone else. Our fantastic public health team couldn't be here tonight, or we actually tried to protect them because they have been working 5, 6, 7 days a week, nonstop. Since March 2020. It started with the Emergency Operations Center and continues as we mount vaccination clinics and as they work tirelessly to get things done. And as you've heard, shorthanded, we have the same vacancies that everyone else is experiencing right now. Our team worked with lots of different partners to achieve a 72.5% all ages vaccination rate for the 2-shot series, 5 percentage points above the statewide average. Our booster shot rate is also above average, about 50% of those that are eligible, 18 and above. Our the new CDC county risk rating places us in the moderate or amber risk category. Case rates are continuing to fall, as well as is test positivity and local hospitalizations. So I'm expecting that we'll move down to the low risk category or green in the next couple of weeks. And with that positive news, we joined OHA, the Oregon Health Authority, in dropping our local indoor mask mandate here for Benton County. But we still strongly encourage people to continue to mask indoors as needed to protect themselves and others, especially if they have particular health vulnerabilities. Lastly, working with the 509J school district, thank you, Ryan and team, we more than doubled the size of the Lincoln Health Center in South Corvallis. At that clinic, there right next to Lincoln School, it's a school-based center, and we can now see twice the number of patients, as well as offer dental hygiene and pharmacy services. And that clinic serves 2,000 patients, of whom 800 are children. So it's a busy place. What's next? I'm going to continue to work at the intersection of legal system and health systems to remove service barriers and improve outcomes for people. I'm particularly interested in access to inpatient mental health and substance use disorder treatment. And that shows up in lots of different ways, in the intersection of the legal system and for folks that are not justice involved. So it's a very complex arena, and I feel like I'm just learning my way around it after spending 5 years in office. My fellow commissioners and I are going to continue to finalize the facilities selection for our 2023 bond measure, and that's a high priority for all of us. That prioritization of facilities will be based on both our functional needs and community values, and of course, affordability. We'll always be keeping that in mind as well. We'll be holding more community engagement events this spring and early summer on that topic as we move forward. One of my personal goals is to keep racial and ethnic disparities in the forefront of our decision making. And that's whether we're discussing health, access to health outcomes, housing access, or criminal legal system. I look forward to working with all of you here on the panel, as well as our other partners in the private sector and around the community, community-based organizations. We've got a lot on our plates, but despite COVID, I think we've accomplished an incredible amount. Thanks.
Thank you, Zan. Now, finally, on to Mayor Biff Traber. Mayor Traber, what accomplishments and difficulties do you feel the city has experienced in the past year? And what opportunities and challenges do you see for the next year for the community?
Well, I would say first, thank you to the Advocate and the City Club and all of you who are joining tonight. These opportunities to talk about the past year and the future year are very important so that you can see what's going on and get an understanding of where things are going. I would say coming up last in this crew, I kept checking off things on my list as others covered them. And so that actually gives me the opportunity to just hit some high points and some of really high points of things I think are really important, and not go through all the detail that I was going to go through before. And I do these in 30-minute chunks at times. But the first one I wanted to hit is COVID, or we refer to it, we've been talking tonight about COVID in a variety of fashions. It has hit us hard. We have gotten through it. I wanted to actually, one of the key things I wanted to mention about it, since a year ago, we were thinking we were heading into a recovery, and we're still heading into a recovery. And what's helped us get through has been such things as the guidance from the health department. So I want to note the work the health department has provided, the direction to us, and then thank all of you in the community for listening and following that. With all of that, the city staff, county staff, I presume, and the community as a whole has been able to manage their way through this without huge tragic loss of life and the like. And I remember some of the back in 2020, the discussions when the Emergency Operations Center was open and we didn't know where things were going to go. So just wanted to acknowledge that and the partnering they did with us, with OSU, with I believe 509J and the hospital. The health department helped pull a lot of this together and helped us get through this. Second, I wanted to hit on, I guess I call it my one topic, favorite topic of two parts, and that has to do with housing and homelessness. I say that is one topic with two parts because it's a serious problem in our city, and it has its ramifications in various fashions, and homelessness or houselessness is one of those impacts, even though some of the things we're doing are in parallel paths. But on housing, you've heard a lot of the detail. I just wanted to come back and emphasize, we have a serious lack of housing in this community across multiple income levels. It's not simply low income, where we're one of the most rent burdened cities in Oregon. but it's middle income, working people, housing, all of this. It's just not there for people to choose. And anyway, I'm going in too much detail. That's an important one, and we must continue to address it. As Paul had described, we started addressing it years ago, a number of years ago. I don't want to make it sound too far back, and we are making progress. And Paul referred to such things as the Land Development Code comp plan updates, the mixed use zoning that did pass last night, which is good news. Underway right now is the middle housing code modifications, and those are going forward. We actually had our first major council approved residential annexation passed last year. So accomplishments last year. And it was done with something new to us, annexation agreements, not new to most of the governments in Oregon, but new in Corvallis. And that was an important model for us to look at going forward. And along with that, another project coming through on Land Development Code is how to update those criteria so it becomes clearer what's required for an annexation, to make it clearer for those who were looking to do it, to move forward. We passed, I'm trying to think, 4 or 5 years ago, the construction excise tax to help help fund affordable housing development and the like. And Paul referred to 11 units, actually houses, in a community land trust that Dev North is doing. That is one of the things we've been able to fund out of that construction excise tax. And we have low-income housing developments underway. I heard last night from testimony, we need to start doing this. This is underway right now. Not enough, but it is moving forward. And then on houselessness, you heard about hope from multiple commissioners and from Paul. That has been a major thing we put in place a couple of years back to begin to provide the forum, come up with the strategies adopted by council and commission and moving forward. Underneath all of that, developing this team approach between Benton County, the city, service providers, community services consortium, how those who can make this happen are working together now. And then applying things like the federal dollars and the CET funds, Third Street Commons, state and federal dollars, excuse me. Third Street Commons is an example from last year. This year, we have used community development block grant dollars that staff pulled together to help fund acquisition of 2 duplexes of permanent supportive housing. And they already had mentioned about the homeless pilot funding from the state that just came through at the end of the legislative session. So this is all moving forward. We are making progress, and there's a great deal more to be done. And that's something we need to focus on and continue to focus on. And that part, as you heard through all of that, we have been developing, I almost see it as a bit of a silver lining from the early days of the pandemic response. And that was, we started the Emergency Operations Center. We had city and county, a joint one, working together on various aspects. And what's come out of that over the past 2 years and will continue going forward is this, how do we work these things together? The Joint Economic Development Office preceded all of that, but we're talking about HOPE, which is a joint activity between the city and county. We were talking about all of that underneath HOPE. We talked about the chief referred to CORE for the crisis response, crisis outreach and engagement activity. How do we do something together with mental health practitioners and our police officers? So we're beginning to develop these solutions and doing them together. And I think that for this community as a whole, the major city and the county working together on how do we address the problems we have. And going forward, I think in this year, we're going to continue to work on those items. Most of these things I described have started and are moving forward. We will continue to work on them.
Thank you, Biff. And thank you again, everyone, for taking time to answer the questions from our editorial board. Now we'll move on to our viewer questions, which will be facilitated by Steve.
Thank you, Emily. For our viewers, if you would like to get a question in, you can hit the post on the live feed on social media, or you can email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. That's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. The first thing I want to do is actually deal with a viewer question directed at us, which is why not the district attorney? And being blunt, we felt like with Chief Hurley and Sheriff Van Arsdall here, and that there were already 10 or 11 folks scheduled for this evening, we didn't ask him. That being said, maybe we are remiss. So your point is well taken, and I appreciate the viewers' sense that we should have asked. Okay, moving right along, Chief Hurley, and I'm actually going to dial in Sheriff Van Arsdall under this. Both of you have participated in the CORE program, or your agencies are working with that, with CORE. Is that the case, Sheriff?
So obviously I got to the game late, and by that point, Chief Hurley and Danielle Brown from the health department had already started engaging in this project. When I got here, I volunteered to Chief Hurley and Danielle both. I've got an incredibly well-trained staff, CIT training. I've got almost 70% of my deputies have been through CIT. But currently I also have 6 openings, which is essentially an entire shift in my office. So for me to try and throw a resource at it right now is pretty tough. With that being said, I've got 10 really talented parole and probation deputies, and I've got almost 30 really talented jail staff that see people at their lowest, deal with people at their lowest, and are compassionate and help people work through their problems. So as we move forward in the CORE and we start identifying where needs and resources might go, I'm more than willing and open, as I've explained to Chief Hurley. I've got an incredibly talented staff, and I can certainly.
So something you would like to do, but right now you're resource constrained.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. And then Chief Hurley, I know that you've initiated the CORE program at the police department. Just a quick 30 seconds. How's that going? How many encounters have you had where there's been a referral and folks are in continuing treatment?
Yeah, so real quick, as Commissioner Ozero shared, they have hit quite a few cases. The beauty of this team is that they're not attached to call for services, so they're not getting dispatched to a business alarm and a car crash and a fight downtown. They are specifically able to do the work that sometimes takes 2 hours. And then they're doing the referral follow-ups from maybe someone that graveyard officers dealt with last night. They didn't rise to the level to be taken to the hospital against their will, basically on a peace officer custody. But it was enough that there's maybe some follow-up that we can do. And so our CORE team goes out, they go to their residence, and they contact the individual. And sometimes it's a better discussion, they maybe calm down, and then they refer them to those. So I don't have I'm looking through my stack. Didn't have quite the numbers that Commissioner Ozero had prepared. I just did.
Now, where do they get referred to? Where do they get referred to? Do they get referred to the health department, or is it another resource?
It just depends. It really depends on the situation and the person that's experiencing that crisis. So our qualified mental health practitioner can get them into a myriad of programs within the health department or with an actual case management assigned person, or we can get them to sometimes it's a service that they're needing. We do warm handoffs with the daytime drop-in center. So it just really depends on the person in the community that's having that experience as to what sort of resource we connect them with. But we're really starting to see some very positive interactions and successes in that.
I know in your profession, like in the health professional, you get what are called frequent flyers, folks that you have really regular contact with. Are you starting to see where that's having a positive effect? The CORE program is starting to have a positive effect in that constituency?
To a degree. The challenge is, and if Danielle Brown was here, thankfully she's getting the night off, she would share that from the lens of your constitutionally protected rights, you have to participate as a subject in therapy or treatment, and we can't mandate it to that degree. And so they have to come to the table and participate. And we have folks that for whatever reason do not want any assistance. But our CORE team's motto and belief when I meet with them is they go out and repetitively will hit that same person up and say, hey, we understand you had contact with the law enforcement last night. And again, they're hoping that maybe that next time or this time, that person will take them up on some resources. And so they're starting to make a different connection that our patrol officers just don't have the ability and time to make that connection.
Right.
And
I
maybe
guess
that
the real
trust
question
built
is,
up.
there's been at least some percentage of folks there's been some success.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have
Hazard a guess on numbers, or maybe would Zan be in a better position to answer that, because she kind of works with the health department closely.
Yeah,
I don't have,
Oh, go ahead.
while you look at the numbers, I don't think we have numbers of people that have been helped in any kind of permanent way, because it's hard to count that in such a short period of time, right?
Okay.
But certainly we have diverted several people from jail and from the emergency room. I think there was only one person that ended up in the jail over the last 6 months that was dealt with by the
Right
quarantine.
now, are you doing long-term tracking?
Yes, they are doing. We're doing long-term tracking both in the system, for the police department, that's shared among all of the law enforcement agencies.
So in a couple few years, you'll have
also
a
in the
body
health
of data.
forums.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect.
And that is one of the core goals.
Okay.
Steve, this is a pilot program. The board just got a 6-month report from July 1st through December 31st. So it's early days, but very promising.
Sounds encouraging, and I think the viewer will be happy to hear it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the question that everybody knows is coming. Why what are this viewer is calling the homeless camp sweeps in town, when there is when in this viewer's experience, there is no alternative housing. I'm going to start with Chief Hurley on this.
Well, that's a good question, and it's one that I don't feel quite well prepared to venture. It's there's some policy level decisions that council makes. I think Director Bilotta could assist in some of the theory in terms of how we go. It's not a law enforcement decision that we do those things. We are responding to requests.
So in other words,
property owners.
You are simply acting on policy decisions, Mayor Traber. So why is this continuing when there's a lack of alternative housing? And when I say, I'm paraphrasing what the viewer is asking.
Well, I think there is that serious situation that there is not enough shelter, not enough housing, and that's why we work to focus on building that up. That doesn't mean that and it has been a policy decision made by City Council that particularly in places where there is environmental impact, safety issues, that the camps should be posted and moved. And that's the primary criteria for deciding where those go.
Right. And another viewer,
property owner complaints.
Right.
And so that's where that comes in. Why aren't there places for them to go to camp? We got questions last night again about managed camps, and there are issues of lack of.
You knew where I was going.
Well, I was going to say
you and I, to be honest with you, I didn't look at the questions till probably a half an hour before this thing, and you and I both knew this question was going to come. Right.
So the
why not managed camps?
So where I was going is, one, where is a place to put such a managed camp, and two, we talked already about staffing and organizational capacity.
Right.
And in this community as a whole, the broad community, we depend on the service organizations, the service providers in the community as the vehicles to manage these things.
So in other words,
community shelter provides one of the managed camps we have in town that's a limited size. It also has the largest micro shelter.
How many can they accommodate?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Is it inadequate? Now, do you know if it's an adequate number or not?
It's not adequate.
Okay.
It's part of why we're continuing to work more for example, there is an outstanding request for proposal to operate between the city and county, 8 micro shelters at 2 different sites that has been responded to and is being processed right now.
And now I've got another viewer wants to know why can there not be at least a place where there is some outhouses and maybe trash receptacles, even though it's not a managed camp, from the standpoint of just keeping the area clean?
We have put in outhouses primarily in parks. We have put in trash receptacles around. We have not gone and followed where the campers want to cluster and then moved in and
Got it. Okay.
things. There are insurance ends up being another thing that we all ran into when we tried our first effort to do a managed camp 2 years ago, in late 2020. And
now the same viewer asked, and I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, and I should add that we will probably do a major program on homeless sometime over the summer, as we generally do. But can some of these folks be, some of them that are able-bodied and able otherwise, can they be put in a situation where they can be doing small jobs to help? Their impression is that's not going on. I don't know if it is or if it's not.
Well, you ask a question where the general answer would be possibly yes. Part of it, again, is organizational capacity to put that in place. There is one,
I just don't know if you're aware of something I'm not aware of.
There is one activity in town that's been here for a long time through the, I believe it's still through the Daytime Drop-In Center, but it's Project Help.
Okay.
Was it homeless employment? Anyway, they provide anyway, short-term.
I was not aware of the program. You clearly know more than I do. So
that's been there for 6 or 8 years now.
Okay, great.
Now, is it used enough? I don't know. So I don't know the details there.
Well, see, now the viewer knows about it.
That is part of an organization stepping up, and we help those organizations with funding, with regulatory relief from the city point of view, with support from the health department, from the county point of view, as I understand it. But we all depend on having those organizations grow, which then I'll come back around to and make it a longer answer, but a very important one, which is where Hope comes along. And this pilot project funding that we got this year is so important because it is a way that we can expand the capacity to be able to develop these organizations and to develop these solutions. So it all takes time and it is a priority, but it is not something that happens overnight.
Then Biff, as to the existing program at the Daytime Drop-In Shelter, to clarify, that is, for the viewer, that is the center that is in that brick building by the old car wash right before the overpass, right?
That is where well, it's a little more before the overpass, but yes, that's in the Daytime Drop-In Center.
Right. Can tell how often I drive by there.
I believe that's where Project Help is open. It operates out of, but I could be corrected because this information may be old. I know Zan started to answer. If you can point people at a better place, please do.
Yeah, find my favorite taco place. So.
Tacos El Machin. Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. The Help had its own storefront office, but I'm not sure if during COVID they contracted into the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center. I do know that one of the big obstacles that they have is not enough employers seeking people for and offering work. So that is something that any one of us could do.
Does city or county have work that they could be doing?
I think that it's mostly individuals that are employing these homeless individuals and not the city and county. We have our own work crews of various types that we employ, both juvenile and adult.
To the viewer, you can pursue this with the Daytime Drop-In Shelter, and you'll have to look up HELP, which is an acronym that I don't know what it stands for, but I believe they are located downtown. Okay, and then Chief Hurley, the suspect in the recent strangulation case had 2 prior encounters with police same day. Is there a reason he was not taken into custody on one of those 2 prior encounters and jailed rather than being free and then ultimately breaking into a home and strangling a woman?
Well, I think I'm going to kick part of that to the sheriff for policies in terms of the jail. But I think we all recognize that the challenges within our community are we have an incredibly small jail. And especially under COVID protocols, we're under the challenge of how many we can actually house in that facility. And I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but there are significant challenges in terms of how he can triage a custody in, and when they determine that they're going to remove someone from the jail to bring someone else new in, and it depends on a lot of factors.
So was it in fact the case that those were offenses that might have jailed somebody if there had been space in the jail? Is that the case? Is the
Well,
viewers?
if you're asking if they were charges of criminal nature, yes, they were a criminal nature charge. However, again, they have to look at, when we don't have beds for everybody in the jails, we have to determine when we triage someone in and out. And I think the sheriff's going to jump in.
I can hop
Yeah,
in here
and I
and
was
just
going
answer
to
everything
ask
for you,
really
Steve.
directly, and I'm going to want to be frank. One of the criticisms that we're seeing a lot of in social media and the questions that we've received in email and so forth is the sense that this was widely reported by, I believe it was the police department in their social media, as a way of demonstrating why we need the jail. It was taken, frankly, as lobbying, but I don't know if that's fair or not. But I'm letting you know this is what the viewers ask is. Could you speak to that, Jef?
Sure.
I'll just say quite frankly, the policy currently in the facility is A and B felonies, mandatory arrests, or post-prison supervision. The facility is too small, and with the bottleneck at the Oregon State Hospital, I have an entire section of my facility that's tied up with single cell occupants that require a lot of our time. And so therefore, even though we have a 40-bed jail, I can be at occupational capacity at 19. And so I couldn't predict that this guy who committed a couple of low-level misdemeanors is going to escalate to this level. You can't predict or forecast that. So
now, otherwise, if you'd had the beds, you would have retained him.
I can't say that I would. Again, it's a low-level misdemeanor. I'm planning on opening the facility next week to at least fingerprint and photograph everybody. But again, if I'm at operational capacity at 19 and we bring somebody in that's trespassed, chances are they'll get fingerprinted, they'll get photographed, they'll get a court date, and they'll be released from the facility.
But if you'd not been
that's
at operational,
that's not a new operation either.
Right.
I started here with Corvallis Police in 1997, and that's been the operation since I began.
I guess what I'm driving at is if you'd not been at operational capacity, would he have been jailed?
He could have been held if we're not full, but unfortunately,
okay,
operational capacity requires us to start looking at it, and we can get into the B prey and how we figure this out. But it's A and B felonies, mandatory arrests, and then post-prison supervision before anybody else.
Okay, good. And I just, I'm going to ask more questions about, because clearly we want to talk about jail capacity. Chief Hurley, it sounded to me like you had something to add. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, I was just going to point out that the criticism that we had put that out as a lobby is frankly disappointing when we get blown up because we don't put enough information out, that we have criminal acts within our community that become that nexus of, I'm concerned about why would there 5 police cars on my neighbor's street, and then I get inundated with email requests and curiosity. So when we do a press release of a significant event, had nothing to do with lobbying, and other than we're just telling that here's the circumstances, and an unfortunate event. But again, as the sheriff said, we can't predict the behavior based on a low-level misdemeanor of a trespass, which quite frankly, when I'm looking at over 1,100 or 700, we have significant trespass issues in our community.
Okay, and then I want to move back to Sheriff Van Arsdall. This is a question we're getting a lot. The discussion is to triple jail capacity. And if you do get triple the capacity, will we as a county, do we have policy in place to stop what is very often being referred to as a catch and release program? I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but it is the terminology that we've heard time and again. So people are getting that term from somewhere. If you get the jail capacity, just catch and release stop is the way I'm paraphrasing it. I don't feel comfortable that I can say
Well,
that
I
that's
can
fair
answer that for
assessment.
you.
I just don't know.
Obviously, my hope is yes, right? I live in this community. We all live in this community. And I want to make sure that we have that nice balance between accountability and treatment. And so my hope is, of course, yes. If I am fortunate enough to be in overseeing a 120 bed facility, it doesn't happen overnight. And so it's going to be a phased in approach. With that, if I had a 70, 80 bed facility right now, and it was a modern facility, we could put 70, 75 people. I would never want to be at full capacity just because if the city does have a major incident, I need to have a place to put people, right? If
Right.
the county has an incident in Monroe, I've got to have a spot for people to go. But ideally, yes, a 120 bed facility, we're able to take care of our own, really.
Right. And then the other question we're getting is, okay, what if this bond measure, it's failed, what, 2 or 3 times in the past? I'm not really aware. How many times has it failed in the past? Zan, you may know the answer to that, or Pat. 3. Okay, good. So if this were to fail again, is there any alternative being looked at that would at least tide the county over until some other way of approaching the community for increased capacity could be, I guess, reckoned or figured out? Is any other alternative being looked at?
Well, I can tell you quite honestly, no. We're bound by presiding judges' orders. We're bound by sentencing orders and guidelines. And quite honestly, pre-pandemic, we could use our neighboring county jails, but they've all closed up shop and realized that their facilities are amazing and they just want to house their own population. And then Polk County was kind enough, Sheriff Garten leases us 10 beds. So we're meeting the presiding judge's order by at least having 10 beds in a neighboring county. So I have a place there. The beds we rent at Norcor, I rent 22 beds at Norcor. And those are for people that are sentenced not to the Department of Corrections, but are sentenced to essentially county jail time.
Right, but I guess with, I hate to use the example, but I know one viewer has, why not tents?
Would that be any better than housing the homeless out on the streets? I don't think we want to do that. Basically, we are in crisis now. We are renting beds in Norcor for those that are already sentenced, and we're leasing beds for pre-trial from Polk County. We've been in this mode for a long time. I'm not sure if it extends to a couple of decades, but we've been leasing beds for a very long time. We're already in Plan B.
Right, I guess with the vast majority, and I need to let you know, the viewers are all over the place on this. There are people who are like, can you build it yesterday? And there are people who are like, no, not going to spend a dime on it. We've got a lot of questions. I'm trying to paraphrase them all in groups. But I guess from this standpoint, this view of it is there some kind of facility that could be built that is less than a full-scale 120 bed facility that would at least tide the county over for some number of years that could maybe be added onto later?
I would say that right now, although our nominal bed capacity at our local jail is 40 beds, as Sheriff has explained, typically the capacity can be 19, 26, 32, maybe upper limit, because of the nature of people adults that we have in custody, gender balance.
Right, but that's not really the question that's being asked by these viewers. What's really being asked is,
what I want to say is that right now our daily census tends to be much closer to 70. So let's forget this, 30, 40 number. That's about how many people we deal with now. 120 is not that big a number when you're looking at 70 now, and we want to have room for those eventualities, those spikes in crime, or for 20 years growth, because we're not going to get another opportunity to build another correctional facility for a long time. This is our opportunity, and population is growing. So I would say that a temporary facility, we're already in a temporary facility. That's what this is, that's adjacent to the courthouse. We need a correctional facility for the long term that meets current present day best
In
practices.
fact,
and
people
construction
don't realize
standards.
the current jail was built in, I forget which year, 79 or something, 78, as literally it was supposed to be temporary, like 3-4 year facility. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. And then I've got a corollary question, which is the exact opposite. Why only 120 beds? Is it not anticipatable that we're going to wind up needing far more than that in 20, 30 years? And why not build that now and it'd be less expensive to do it?
We can only build what the community can bear in terms of price. And 120 beds is what we felt was, or in that vicinity, what was judicious in terms of looking out 20 years.
I mean, has anybody
and
looked to
what we
see
can-
would it
the
cost
community can bear.
appreciably more to build 20 more beds since you're already building the facility?
That's the kind of question that we can ask in the next a bit of time, especially after we
Sure.
get to the point of where we're what we're putting on the ballot for sure. We have to answer those final questions. And then, of course, there's the engineering design phase if the bond measure passes and finalizing exactly what we're going to do. What I would say, though, is that that's been a core question in our site search is having enough ground that we can expand if we need to someday in the future. We don't want to build on a site where we wouldn't be able to
With nowhere to go,
expand,
right?
whether it's
Got it.
emergency operations center or correctional.
Steve, this is Pat, and a couple things. It was built
Yeah.
in 1976 as and temporary isn't the right word, more of a processing center. There was supposed to be a regional facility built by the state that was never built. And so we anticipated a larger facility in the region that would actually take care of this problem, but that was never built.
Right. Okay. Got it. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to a couple of other quick subjects here. There is a question, Sheriff Van Arsdall, about non-suicide deaths in the jail in recent years. One under your watch, the cause of death, as this viewer sees it, of Alyssa Sund, doesn't seem likely in their view that she would have died from meth poisoning when she'd been in custody for 91 hours already. Can you speak to that viewer's concern here?
Those cases are still open cases pending litigation, and I can't speak to those.
Okay, thank you. And I think that closes that one out. Okay, why don't we go ahead and move into another line of questioning. I'm going to move over to Ryan at schools. So are you aware of how many students have actually contracted AIDS over the course of the pandemic through schools? Do you have any sense of that?
I do not.
Okay. Zan, does the health department keep numbers like that? Are you aware?
Contracted COVID over the period of the pandemic.
Yeah, just through schools. I mean, I'm going to ask you the question later generally, and you might be able to look that up kind of as I move through Ryan's questioning. But any sense of how many students have contracted AIDS?
I think you mean COVID.
COVID, sorry.
So that
For a decade.
Mhm.
I know that we have data by age group, and I can look at that by age group. I can't say how many of them actually are 509J students per se.
Okay.
So Steve, you asked me the AIDS question too, and so that's
sorry
why
about that. Yeah, I meant COVID.
That's why I said I didn't have any idea. With regards to COVID, we've had a dashboard that has shown that over time, and I would need to go back to look to see if it's been updated the last week or two. But up to that point, it had been updated frequently. What we saw as a trend overall throughout the pandemic is that more cases came from exposures outside of school than within school.
Now the dashboard's on your site.
Yeah.
Is it easy to navigate to from the homepage?
It has been in the past. I'll take a look to see that it's still up.
Okay, great. I think that really answers this viewer's question adequately, to be honest. And sorry for my error in because I was
That's
just
okay.
reading this. I was just reading a story on AIDS, so never mind. So my apologies for that confusion. And then, will the schools offer vaccination? This is really, we're getting two lines of questions here. Will the schools offer COVID vaccinations? And will the schools require at some point COVID vaccinations? Should they be fully, should the vaccination be fully approved by the CDC?
So at this point in time, we continue to work with the county, again, in a great partnership in making sure that we have vaccination clinics in locations in our community where the rates are lower. So again, making sure that we're providing access. So we'll continue to do that. With regards to having a vaccine requirement, at this point, that would be something that would be put in place at the state level rather than at the local level.
Got it. Okay, thanks for answering that. And will you at the schools be requiring mask after the 12th?
They are optional after the 12th. There are places where we're highly recommending it.
Got it. Okay, good. Thanks. And then this one, I'm going to have you take a few minutes with, and it's the reason I kind of rushed you through those because they're really direct answers and I appreciate it. What does the school district teach about race? I've got a number of questions. Some of them I'm not going to repeat the way that they are asked. But what does the school district teach about race?
So we want to make sure that our students leave our schools with the ability to have conversations that around race, around culture, around identity. And schools are the place that can happen in a way that is supported by staff. So in our schools, we have conversations about race, we have conversations about identity, because if we don't have those conversations in our schools.
Okay, so in that conversation, what's being taught?
Taught that that we are recognizing that oftentimes that conversation is something that people aren't good at, something that people in a community that is predominantly white like ours can avoid having conversation about, and that we have to be able to recognize where other perspectives and other people's experiences and how those influence and in a lot of ways improve what happens in society as a whole.
And then is the school district teaching either CRT or any curriculum that states that this country is, how am I going to term this, is systemically implicitly biased or racist?
So ask me the first part of the question again.
So I'm going to try to rephrase it again. You can tell I'm struggling with the way it's being asked, right?
Sure.
And I'm trying to translate it to something constructive. So is the school district teaching in some way that racism is implicit within our system?
I think that we are looking at outcomes. We're looking at the ways that race impacts people's lives. And so I think that we are having conversations that identify spaces and places where race has had an impact on the lives of people over time. And I think that's an important thing for us to be able to talk about.
Okay. And then my understanding is there's been quite a beefed up curriculum in terms of Holocaust education. And while not everybody's satisfied with it, it's better than it was. And if I understand Native American history as well, am I correct about that?
Yeah, you're correct on both. And one thing I would say is that it's not just segmented to social studies. We think about it in terms of language arts and humanities as well. So it's not something that a student would experience in one class standalone.
Right. And are the curriculums for these things available through the schools for parents to go through and look at?
Yeah, we've encouraged parents to reach out to their school principal to come and have a conversation. I know some of the coordinators in our departments here have had conversations with families as well.
Right. So the parents really have the ability to go ahead and grab this information for themselves if they like.
Yeah, we always encourage people to come and have conversations because there's so much context that comes from conversation. But and I think that's an important component. The same thing we're trying to teach kids as they navigate these topics.
Right. And so I guess what I'm really driving at is the district is doing everything it can be to be transparent completely in terms of the curriculum here.
Yeah, we are willing to meet and talk.
Okay, great. Lastly, I would say that there's been some controversy over the math program. Apparently, there were some changes. What's being taught? What were the changes, and what was the goal for those changes?
So one of our goals is that by the time students are in 8th grade, they're all prepared to take algebra. We continue to provide advanced courses at our high schools through Calculus BC. We're also adding a data science component. There are instances where in the past we have moved students through some of those earlier skills too quickly in areas where they aren't able to learn it at the depth that they need to be successful in those upper division classes. We've heard that from our staff as kids have transitioned through their schools. And so we're wanting to make sure that we're really bolstering students' school skills early on, rather than leapfrogging over content or concepts that they're going to need to know later on. And sometimes that happens when you move students through curriculum at a rate that's too fast. So what we're trying to do is slow down a little bit when our students are younger and still give them work that's challenging. And at the end of the day, have more kids successful in algebra in 8th grade and kids prepared to take those advanced classes as they move through high school.
And now the concern is that this means that some students are being held back a little bit, that they could be achieving more if the changes had not been made. Is that the case? Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a critique of the shift that we've made.
Is it a fair assessment?
I don't know that it's a fair assessment, because what we've seen over time is that many students who moved at a quicker rate missed out on some skill building that they needed later on. So it's hard to speak to that other than to say that we've looked at the research and spent a lot of time with that, and we're continuing professional development with our staff.
So in other words, a student that's going to excel past some of the others would anyhow, given the current system.
They will actually have stronger skills as they move through our system and find successes throughout. And,
right, okay.
And we're hoping that they continue to enjoy math and continue to take it through the end of their high school career.
Ryan, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move over to Paul now. And for our viewers, just so you know, we're quite a bit over time already. And so I'm trying to move through quickly. If it feels like I'm moving quickly, I'm trying to. Paul, there's been some sense that mom and pop landlords, given what's gone on with eviction moratoriums and the rest, are starting to pull units off the market. Do you know if that's the case? Has there been a reduction or increase in available rental units from before the pandemic to now?
Yeah, thanks. We don't have hard data, but we do work with the rental property managers group and get some information. We also did a couple surveys on vacancy. What's happening is, what we've heard is happening is that, first of all, our vacancy rates are not high. One of the things we did early on in the pandemic was really proactively got out there to let tenants and landlords know where the resources were to deal with rent payments out through CSC. And at one time we were even pulling in so many folks that CSC had to tell us to stop because they had to get some to some other people too. So the landlord community has said that generally they're in pretty good shape. I'm sure there are some people out there that are, onesie twosies that are having an issue. What's been happening more as far as people switching over has been some of the new student-oriented projects have started to turn some of those properties back into home ownership, which is a normal thing that happens. That happened after the retreat as well. Some of the more remote ones end up going that way. We also heard that there were quite a few, when the students were missing last year, there were quite a few people who came in off of the fire relocations from around the state. And so there were more families moving into some of those locations as well. So there's a lot of things going on in the market, but generally the rental market's been pretty solid and no one's really taking a big financial hit either way.
Right, but are we seeing a reduction in available units for rent is, I think, the concern, because the vacancy factor has always been incredibly low here.
Right. Vacancy rates are still too low, but they are above. Every time we put a big amount of product on the market, the vacancy rates go higher. So we used to be below 2% regularly. We're now a little bit over that, but we still are not anywhere near the 5% that is a normal market.
Okay, got it. And then are some of these South Corvallis URD dollars, the projects that are occurring, do some of those not have to do with affordable housing, or do they? I think the concern, the way I'm reading this, is that some of the URD dollars are going into either beautification, and they're going into things that work for businesses, but maybe not necessarily affordable housing, is the way I'm reading the question.
Sure. So the urban renewal district, the way those work is that over time, it takes a while to get any money to actually be able to spend any money. So there isn't any money going out the door at this time for projects. The urban renewal plan identified how much would go to different things. 25% was allocated for affordable housing. So we don't have any beautification projects going on or anything like that at this time. We're trying to get enough money together to be able to do some our first projects. You may see affordable housing come in earlier because it can do kind of a pay as you go, but we don't have any funds that have been allocated for the urban renewal at this time.
Great. And then I'm also going to ask the preserve, the development atop of Timber Hill. To be clear, will the development retain access for folks that don't live in that area to drive up, park the car, and grab a trail that gets them to Mac Forest? Is that going to be a place where people can continue, people from outside the neighborhood can continue to access Mac Forest?
That's an active land use case. I can't talk about it too deep, but that's a fact you're asking me. And so, yes, there will be a connection to the McDonald Forest and the plans that are.
Oh no, and I'm intentionally wanting to keep it factual. I know where you are. I get it. And then opponents cite wildfire concerns. The developer says they've addressed that with a plan with a higher count of hydrants and such. Is it true that there will be, that hydrants are a part of that plan, and does it appear to be, does it fulfill his requirements to supply that?
I will say that all city streets require fire hydrants. I won't touch the wildfire issue because that'll get into the elected officials we have here.
Got it. Yep. I totally good. Yep. Okay, and I'm about to say words that I don't know what they mean. But this viewer is curious about the middle housing concept. When will that go into effect? And when will the LDC requirements be available to view? Or maybe they are already.
They are already. If you go onto our website and look under, just search for middle housing, you'll see all the work from the Department Advisory Committee and the Council and the Planning Commission, and the draft amendments are on there right now, and they're moving through that process. They're at the Planning Commission right now.
Okay, and this last question, we've already discussed affordable housing, and I feel like we're going to be doing panels on that later in the year, so I'm going to skip some of this. But there was a specific one about really, I think this comes down to employer-assisted housing. So the question being, is there something that's being done in terms of interagency cooperation, specifically perhaps housing teachers or mid-level OSU employees and others? The questioner points out there is land available between Brooklyn Drive and the school district east of 35th Street. It's the old turkey farm owned by
Yep.
OSU, places like that. Is there anything going on there?
Yeah, there are employers have definitely seen it. School district has been one who's interested, but of course they don't have much ability to do things themselves. They're in a different business. But the OSU is looking at that south farm area for going out for development. So that would be an opportunity there. The other one major employer is Samaritan has a piece of ground that's residential north of them. And they have also been looking at doing something there that would be tied in directly with community needs and their own facility needs. We did also, the council put a big chunk of land for high density residential right adjacent to HP, which also was to kind of be a little bit of that employer base, even though HP is not involved in that.
Okay, and then with that, I'm going to go ahead and move over to Kate. Paul, thanks for the directness of the answers. Kate, what you do, your wheelhouse has been a little bit in the headlines of late. Downtown Corvallis Association. If you were to read the reports in the Gazette Times, there's been an impression from some that have read that coverage that what's happened is that the city asked that the Downtown Corvallis Association be audited, and responsive to that, Jennifer Moreland gave notice and is moving to Florida, and the Downtown Corvallis Association board decided to dissolve. My understanding is, in fact, it was really the exact opposite. That what happened was Jennifer Moreland gave notice, and about the same time, the Downtown Corvallis Association was in fact considering dissolving. And once the decision was made actually to dissolve, the city came back and said, oh yeah, by the way, we probably need a closeout audit. In fact, you were in on some of those meetings, if I'm correct. So do I have it straight, or which account is accurate?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. No, you've got it exactly correct. Your accounting of that time frame is exactly right. Jennifer had decided to make a move. Prior to that, the board had had some discussion about their EID, or Economic Improvement District, and had decided not to renew that. There's some reasons I won't go into. Happy to answer questions on it, of course. But then, again, I think as they said in their information that went out to their members, negatively affected by COVID, their director was leaving. And because of that, then the board decided to dissolve their organization. And then, to your point exactly, it was following that then that the city, as we gave that some thought, and the EID coming to an end after 5 years, it seemed like a logical time to conduct a standard audit and kind of look into what's going on.
So it was a matter of course that there would be an audit, given it's city dollars. And then I guess the other piece of that is there was discussion for a number of months, but the actual decision was actually made during one evening's meeting. And I think was it you that brought up that, well, there'll probably need to be an audit. Do you recall?
Yeah, and it's funny, I don't know that I mentioned an audit at the meeting where they were dissolving, because the main topic was their dissolution.
Right, the dissolution.
I will say though, in talking with Simon at the chamber, I did want to let folks know that the chamber board has voted on taking on components of the work that the Downtown Corvallis Association.
Let's stay on the other track for just a minute. Sure. So I just want to clarify that essentially what's happened is Jennifer Moreland gave notice. She's moving with her family somewhere else. The board, seeing that the Economic Improvement District, in fact, what really happened there was folks have not been opting in as much. So that was decreasing. So the board decided to dissolve. And once the decision was made, an announcement was made.
Yes,
Do I kind of, okay, so,
yes,
okay,
that's
got
exactly
it.
right.
Okay, and then, okay, go ahead. And to that, could you explain to our viewers what the EID is, the Economic Improvement District, and what it is that Simon over at the Chamber is going to be doing?
Yeah, so first let's close out the EID topic. So
Sure.
again, Economic Improvement District, it's basically a method of self-taxation that folks can come together and agree to tax themselves for a specific purpose. In this case, it was levied against building owners for the purpose of beautifying, creating more vitality in downtown. The EID, as you said, is not going to be renewed, so that's not coming on the horizon. It'll expire June 30th of this year, so it will be going away. So shifting then to your question about the Chamber, we're pretty excited. Chamber's been an excellent partner to us and our community, and they've had success sort of taking other folks under their umbrella, like the Young Pros, like CIBA, the Corvallis Independent Business Alliance, and creating a space for them to work under the umbrella of the Chamber. And that's exactly the plan for a work group that's going to focus on downtown. They are waiting on a couple of sort of detailed items behind the scenes to ultimately sign on the dotted line about that, but it's looking really positive. We're excited. And Steve, I think the one thing I want to share with viewers is just the importance of downtowns. I think, Paul and others on this call, we all agree. And as an economic developer, I want to tell people the nexus of good community development, strong and vital downtowns is incredibly important to other work that we do in economic development, in creating housing in the core of our city, in our sustainability goals. And so I think from the city perspective, we're just really keen to see the continued success of downtown. And we want to look to potential tools that we can use to help elevate downtown and really do some good stuff down there.
Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep moving on in interest. Thank you for that, Kate, and I appreciate the clarity about what's going on with Downtown Corvallis Association. For all of the folks that are in elected office, I really would hope that only a couple of you answer this, because we are running low on time. This viewer is getting ready for retirement, and this is really typical of what we're hearing outside the context of the state of the city town hall. But we're hearing more of this, but I think it typifies a situation. So this viewer lives in a modest house, is getting ready for retirement, and is seeing their taxes escalate and also the levies, and is wondering, wow, is there some, why don't we have a sales tax to kind of help out with some of this? This viewer is really quite concerned that with the next set of levies, they may not be able to stay in the home that they had hoped to retire in, and may need to leave the area. And they were looking forward to retiring in that home. Why can't there be a sales tax? Is there anybody that can just answer that directly?
I'll give it a shot.
Please do.
This is Pat. I've paid attention to our legislature for a couple decades, and well, maybe I'll go straight to Frank Morris, who was in the state senate representing Albany and Corvallis, and for his decade when he was in the legislature, he worked on this question as a Republican. Didn't get a lot of love from that side
so
of things.
There has been absolutely no support on a statewide level for a sales tax. Is it something that could be enacted locally, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, for those that would like to? It seems as though Biff has raised his hand. Biff, do you know the answer to that?
Well, I know that the sales tax was a local sales tax was something that was examined 6 years ago when we had a sustainable budget task force looking at alternative revenue sources. And if I remember right, there were a couple of challenges with that. Part of it was just how much money would be raised within the city. But the second part was what we were just talking about a moment ago. What would that do to things like downtown? when
Right.
the other downtown is 10 miles away that may or may not have a sales tax. So there's a challenge there of where would the retail business that the sales tax would work with migrate
So
to?
it's something that probably would need to be implemented statewide.
That's
So
generally
if
my
it's
sense.
going to, and the political reality is probably such that's not going to happen particularly soon, as far as I've heard. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I actually want to go back to Pat for a moment. The bike path, Pat. I know it's something that's a passion project for you.
Okay.
And I know several of our viewers would love there to be a bike path between downtown Albany and downtown Corvallis. I know it's going to take a lot of time. I know you know that too. How are we doing on that? What's going on with rights of way funding and any projection of, how many decades?
No, not decades, Steve. Come on now.
Okay, you're more of an optimist.
No, we have funding for the path is in the Albany to Corvallis path is in 4 segments. We have funding for the Corvallis segment and the North Albany segment, and working with partnership with ODOT, the middle section where they're putting in the turn lane for Granger and Independence. I think they're in the process of design and procuring right away for that section.
So funding is coming along. How are we doing on rights of way?
Work in progress. We got stalled at the North Albany end by the railroad. They wouldn't allow us to go under the trestle, even though there's been a path under the trestle for decades. So I'm optimistic about that one. Next up is on my list is to get from North Corvallis north along Highway 99W to Adair / McDonald Forest. That's less than 5 miles, and it's on the county's transportation plan, and I will. Because I think the Albany to Corvallis with infrastructure funding, I think that's.
And to be clear, when you say along Highway 99, you don't mean right on Highway 99.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's currently the way, and I see a few foolhardy bicyclists.
I actually knew the way you were going to answer, but I wanted our viewers to know.
A separate multimodal path.
Right. Okay. And then appreciate that. And then the question that I started with, and you're an optimist, so I'm going to ask you, when is somebody going to be able to grab a bike in downtown Corvallis and land themselves in downtown Albany? How long?
2025. You heard it here. You heard it here first.
Okay, if you pull that off with how many decades people have been trying, that would be amazing to a number of our viewers. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Zan. I know that you work with the health department quite a bit, and I know that you have had some, you've wanted to make efforts in terms of having inpatient mental health beds. We no longer have inpatient mental health beds at Samaritan. Is that correct?
That's not completely correct. They have the number of beds and they created a daytime outpatient treatment program with part of the space. They were closed completely initially, the beginning of COVID, and they didn't reopen until this year. So that caused a huge problem.
Is it enough beds, and what's the effort there?
It's not enough beds right now, and that is partly because of the forensic population or aid and assist population. That's those people that come in through law enforcement hold, or they are not a hold, through law enforcement arrest, and then they are judged not capable of helping their attorneys in their own defense. They need to be restored. So they have to go to the state hospital for that. And because of the fact that there are so many of those aid and assist patients, there's no room for a patient that is self-committed or civilly committed to get into the state hospital. So they all get backed up at Good Samaritan at the psych ward. So it's one of those games of cars where you have to move all the little cars around and try and get them in exactly the right places, and there's only one spot free. That's what the situation is like with
And then the other
beds at the
problem
state
is,
hospital.
the other problem with these holds is, you know, people do get to leave at some point, and sometimes what needs to happen is a family member, because we've investigated this some, as you know, at the paper. What happens is the family is looking at it and they realize that they've got a family member needs to be inpatient at least for a little bit. And there's just no legal anything to do about it. Is the county looked at helping those families get temporary guardianships when it's required?
I don't know that the county has helped with guardianship. That's a complex process, and
Right, and that's I think what this viewer is concerned about, that it is complex and most families are not aware that it's an option, one, and two, how to go about it, and there's some way that county mental health can help walk family members through that.
There are a couple of attorneys locally that specialize in this area. I cannot come up with names off the top of my head,
Right.
unfortunately.
Okay, got it.
But
Okay.
there are.
Okay, got it. And then Danielle Brown, when she was here on Cityspeak last, identified that she felt that after a couple of years of pandemic and shut-in and stress and everything that was going to be going on, we may see a surge in folks seeking help from the county concerning alcoholism and addiction, looking for counseling or services in those areas. Have we started to see the leading edge of that surge, or are we in the middle of that?
We are seeing a little bit of an increase, but not as substantial as we would have expected yet. And
Okay.
Substance use assessments and services are available within the same week. Or
So you say a little bit, I mean, were we talking a single digit increase?
I don't have a percentage, but
Not as bad as
what Danielle said
anticipated.
is that it has not peaked yet. We have not really seen that huge uptick.
Mental health services generally.
Mental health services definitely have seen an increase. And again, I don't have a proportional number, although I can tell you that for adult services, we are currently scheduling in June of 2022 for appointments.
And that was my next question. How long for somebody to see a counselor because sometimes these things are emergent. You want to help people when they want help.
Yeah, that is a huge problem. And
Got it. Okay. And then I think
children's services are better, however, I can tell you that. We're scheduling about 3 weeks out for services for children.
3 weeks out for a child. Okay. And so again, yeah, it's for a child that can be an eternity. So really that's something that is there something being done and hopefully to lower those times?
Our mental health, behavioral health programs, just like everyone else, is experiencing shortages in employees. Qualified mental health professionals are particularly difficult to recruit right now because everyone needs them. So part of the reason for the backup is the increased demand, but it's also the fact that we don't have enough staff. If you take a look at our employment notices, you'll see that we're always looking.
One thing I'd like to add to that is that I think that one of the reasons why the timeline has come down for our youth is because we've added additional staffing in our schools related to mental health therapists and skills trainers. So I think that that timeline would be much longer if we weren't able to do some of that partnering.
Okay, and I'm going to move over to Nancy Weiss now. Thank you, Zan. I'm going to move over to Nancy Weiss. I'm going to tell you there's a considerable number of questions, some of them, I think, really compelling questions about jails. We are just plumb out of time. I'm not going to ask them. I want to guarantee our viewers that we are absolutely going to do a panel on the jail proposal enough ahead of the time that it hits ballots that we'll be able to be informative for you. I promise we'll do that. But tonight is not going to be that night. And what I really do want to get into, though, Nancy, because it's a question that is not got to do with the jail, and there's a lot of jail questions, in fairness, and I feel really bad that we've run out of time, but we're half an hour behind, and everybody's so graciously staying in this Zoom call. I really do appreciate it. But really, I guess the question that comes to mind is about the jail. The one I can ask you is, that I should ask, has there been any polling done to see where voters are at with this? Are you in any, and is there any preliminary result about that?
Thank you for the question. I believe that we are in the process, our staff is in the process of.
When do you think you'll have preliminary results from that?
I could answer that.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but we don't have a polling entity on contract yet, but we probably will have polling information sometime in May or June.
Okay, great. And then, so May or June, and then has there been any further, I know that while you're proceeding with the idea that taking eminent domain may be required, you're also still trying to negotiate with the McFadden family, or LLC rather. How's that coming? Has there been any progress?
A question for me?
Yeah, please.
There's not a whole lot I can say publicly at this point, but the county does hope to reach an agreement that works for both.
I get it. Discussions are ongoing, but you need to be confidential. Got it. Okay, I'm going to move over to Mayor Traber. Mayor, you have decided not to seek a third term. And the question is there anybody that you're endorsing?
Right now, we have 2 candidates who have announced. No one has filed, and no, I'm not endorsing anyone now. I will work with all the candidates to help them understand the job. And I look forward for an interesting election.
Okay, and normally I'd ask some of these other questions as well too, but instead of that, what I want to do is go to first Nancy Weiss and then to Mayor Traber. And I really just want 30 seconds each from you both. We've talked extensively about where the community is today. We've talked extensively about the next year for the community. The question that I'd like to ask both of you is just in a very quick, succinct 60 seconds or less. Where are you hoping what are you hoping the community looks like and where it is at in 1 or 2 key metrics in, say, 10 years? And I'll start with Nancy Weiss, our County Commission Board Chair.
So I would just say I want our community to be healthy and livable and vibrant. And those kinds of communities do not just happen. They are a result of good planning. So we need to be focused on our goals and breaking them into pieces and making sure that we are making progress towards our 2040 goals, and just working on those goals.
Thank you, Nancy. Biff, same question for you. What are you hoping for our community long term?
I think there are 2 areas long term that I would like to see continued progress in a substantial fashion. And I am thinking of 2 metrics as I go through this. The first one is that we have enough housing for people who want to live here to be able to live here. And one metric on that is, Paul mentioned earlier, the vacancy rate. I would like to see us have a steady vacancy rate above 5%. The second one has to do with our greenhouse gas contribution. And I know Scott talked about, I believe he said 80% of the city's power being renewable in the next couple of years. I would like to have us start seeing that number for the community as a whole. be that way, whoever the provider is of electricity and other forms of heating and energy.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Traber. And what I want to say is I actually have a couple of questions for Scott. After 8:30 at night for a panel that's supposed to end at 8. And I know many of you have started early in the morning. I really think we have to at some point call it a night. I would ask that all of you stay past the all clear really quickly. We'll just have a quick 5-minute conversation after the all clear. I do want to point out, I do know some of you started very early in the morning, and I really appreciate you sticking with us this additional half hour, 2 hours on any panel like this. Wow, I just very much appreciate it. I apologize if we couldn't get to a viewer's question this evening. We'll work on making sure you get your questions answered. With that, thank you all, and I'd like to turn it back to Emily.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, thank you to everyone for staying, and also a big thanks to our Corvallis Advocate staff and all of the work that they do behind the scenes that make these Cityspeak town halls possible. Please feel free to check our website for updates on upcoming Cityspeaks, as well as archives of past Cityspeaks. And again, thanks to Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op for helping to make the series possible.